Part 39. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yuchi. Chapter 381. In Tianren Hospital. If the dragon crawling on the ground gives people a sense of visual and psychological oppression, people can't help but feel scared and want to turn around and run away. Then, the dragon rising into the sky gives people a sense of elegant and mysterious visual impact, which makes people want to kneel down and pray for the happiness and well-being of themselves and their families. At the same time, the distance between the dragon and the sky also relieved Qin Beizang's inner uneasiness. But as a pure gold coin appeared in Zhang Fenjai's hand and he gave a confident smile on his face, his inner uneasiness instantly increased a lot. Lock the dragon claws, wrap the dragon body, fix the dragon soul, and destroy the dragon consciousness. Facing Zhang Fenjai's 4 sentences and 12 words, Qin Beizang's eyes showed a puzzled look. In this regard, Zhang Fenjai did not explain too much, and threw the pure gold coin between the index and middle fingers of his right hand at the dragon. Although it was just an ordinary coin made of pure gold, and although the coin did not contain a trace of spiritual power, Qin Beizang felt even more uneasy when facing the pure gold coin that was shot at him. So, he immediately controlled the dragon to swing its claws and slap the pure gold coin that was shot at him. However, what was completely beyond his expectation was that the pure gold coin that was hit by the dragon claws was not only not slapped away, but directly penetrated the dragon claws and shot on the dragon's reverse scale. Then, 4 golden chains suddenly stretched out from the original location of the 4 auxiliary buildings, directly locking the 4 dragon claws of the dragon. Then, from the original location of the pine, cypress, and osmanthus trees in the hospital yard, countless green vines stretched out and quickly wrapped around the dragon's body and tail. Facing the sudden chains and vines, Qin Beizang's face changed slightly and he immediately waved the geomantic ruler to hit the dragon's head hard. Ah! The intense pain that penetrated into the soul made the dragon howl to the sky and struggled desperately. But no matter how hard the dragon struggled, it could not get rid of the chains and vines. Facing the dragon that was unable to get rid of the chains and vines, Qin Beizang had to mobilize the spiritual power of Danshan to condense a sharp sword and began to try to cut the vines. But the result continued to be beyond his expectations. Because even the dragon with the strength reaching the peak of the 9th level of foundation building could not break free of the green vines, under the sharp sword condensed by the 7th level of qi condensation, it was easily cut off like tofu, which made Qin Beizang, who was puzzled, look down at Zhang Fenjai. Facing his puzzled gaze, Zhang Fenjai's mouth corners slightly raised and revealed a hint of irony. In fact, whether it was the golden chain that locked the dragon's claws or the green vines that entangled the dragon's body, they were just ordinary mortals. Not to mention the sharp sword condensed by spiritual power, even an ordinary sword can easily cut off the vines. The reason why the giant dragon, whose strength has reached the peak of the 9th level of foundation building, cannot break free is that the chains and vines are already part of its body. After laughing, Zhang Fenjai quickly condensed a mark with his 10 fingers, and then merged the condensed mark into the ground. When the mark just merged into the ground, the green vines wrapped around the dragon's body and tail suddenly stretched out countless sharp thorns, and then pierced deeply into the dragon's body. Ah! The thorns piercing the dragon's body brought double pain to the body and soul, which was several times more tragic than the beating of the geomantic ruler. This made the giant dragon roar several times, and then the body that rose into the air quickly fell. Because only when the body fell, the pain caused by the vine thorns would be reduced. Even if Qin Beizang desperately waved the geomantic ruler to hit the dragon's horns and the dragon's head, he could not refuse the determination of the giant dragon to fall to the ground. Just as the giant dragon landed on the ground, Zhang Fenjai immediately mobilized the spiritual power of his Danshan to cooperate with Qing Bufeng and instantly appeared in front of Qin Beizang. Then, he stretched out his hand to hold the other end of the geomancy ruler, and then raised his foot to directly kick Qin Beizang's abdomen where his Danshan was located. Puff! The iron-boned physical strength that was about to advance to the great success realm directly destroyed Qin Beizang's hard-trained Danshan, causing him to spit blood, and at the same time, he was like a kite with money broken, flying up into the air and falling on the green vines covered with thorns. This made him enjoy the double torture of the soul and the body, and he couldn't help but howl miserably. Of course, he had to loosen the geomancy ruler that he was holding tightly. After feeling the geomancy ruler in his hand a little, he found that the quality of this secret treasure was far beyond his imagination. The uncontrollable joy in his heart made him smile very brightly on his face. Hurry up and use the secret method taught by the powerful beings in Shushan to quickly refine the geomantic ruler. Then, the jade ruler, which was about 20 centimeters long and 3 centimeters wide, disappeared in an instant and then appeared in the sea of consciousness. This also made Qin Beizang, who did not faint due to the pain, show an incredible look in his eyes. Because he had obtained the geomantic ruler for more than 6 years, he had tried countless methods of refining it, including the blood-dripping recognition, mind induction, etc. mentioned in online novels. But the results were all in vain. So, when Qin Beizang saw Zhang Fengjai refining the geomantic ruler easily, after being shocked, he couldn't help but feel envious and jealous in his heart. Envy Zhang Fengjai, who came from a Taoist sect, who could control the means of refining secret treasures. Zhang Fengjai, who was jealous of the secret treasure, would be able to harvest countless rare treasures in the Feng Shui treasure land with the Feng Shui ruler in the future. After taking a deep breath and forcibly suppressing the joy that kept emerging in his heart, Zhang Fengjai turned his head and looked at Gu Zixuan, who was fighting with the tiger, with a sharp murderous intent flashing in his eyes. When he felt the murderous intent flashing in Zhang Fengjai's eyes, Gu Zixuan, who was thinking of retreating, immediately began to overdraw his Danshan spiritual power to improve his strength, and then threw out 7 sharp knives, using the Big Dipper's attack method to directly shoot at the 7 fatal points of the tiger. Faced with 7 sharp knives that could not be resisted at the same time, the tiger could only retreat continuously and slap the sharp knives one by one. Seeing the tiger being forced back by the sharp knife, Gu Zixuan, with a hint of joy in his eyes, took the opportunity to turn around and flee directly to the hospital gate. Facing Gu Zixuan, who turned and ran away, Zhang Fengjai didn't care at all and quickly condensed a mark with his 10 fingers, and then directly imprinted it on the green vines wrapped around the dragon's body. Then, the green vines wrapped around the dragon's body and tail, as well as the chains that locked the 4 dragon claws tightly, loosened and returned to the ground. At the same time, the green vines also wrapped Qin Beizang, whose cultivation was abolished, and landed safely on the ground. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuqi. Chapter 382. In Tianren Hospital. After removing the golden chains and green vines that bound the giant dragon, Zhang Fengjai reached out and gently patted the dragon's horn to negotiate. "Senior, if you destroy that guy, I will give you freedom, how about it?" Whether it was the release of goodwill by actively removing the restraints, or the mastery of the more powerful geomantic ruler for determining the location of the ache appointment, the giant dragon condensed by the pseudo-dragon vein did not dare, nor was it willing to refuse the request made by Zhang Fengjai. So, the giant dragon tapped the dragon head with force, and then swung the dragon tail in the air, and instantly appeared above Gu Zixuan's head at a speed several times faster than the gale. Then, the dragon body swung up and down and rushed to the ground, and waved the dragon claws to grab Gu Zixuan. Facing the huge dragon claws that were quickly grabbed, Gu Zixuan's face suddenly changed, and a trace of hostility flashed in his eyes, and he took out 3 black knives that exuded a cold breath from his sleeves. Puff! 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 Then, his face turned pale and he spat out 3 mouthfuls of his own blood, spraying them directly on the 3 black knives, and then he threw them towards the dragon claws with force. Facing the 3 black knives that were shot at him, the giant dragon's huge dragon eyes flashed a sneer of disdain, and then he quickly retracted the dragon claws that were stretched out to Gu Zixuan. Then, the swing of his body suddenly accelerated, and he easily shot past the three black knives, which also made Gu Zixuan's pale face instantly like a blank sheet of paper, and his eyes showed a look of despair. Ignoring Gu Zixuan, who was completely desperate and gave up resistance, the giant dragon stretched out its dragon claws to grab him, then looked up at the blue sky, and suddenly an impulse to fly in the sky emerged in his heart. So, the giant dragon used the dragon horn to gently touch Zhang Fengjai, and then used his mind to transmit his thoughts. Take me with you. Zhang Fengjai also wanted to try the feeling of flying and wanted to see where he lived from a high altitude, so he agreed to the other party's request and also put forward his own ideas. After getting Zhang Fengjai's consent, the dragon's eyes immediately showed excitement. Afterwards, it used the power of the dragon vein to stun Gu Zixuan, and after safely sending him to Qin Beizang, it roared excitedly to the sky, and then soared into the sky with its dragon tail swinging. Ah! When the dragon's flying height reached 1,000 meters, Zhang Fengjai had to stimulate the strength of his steel-like body to offset the effects of air pressure and wind speed. When the dragon's flying height reached 10,000 meters, he had to mobilize the spiritual power of his Danshan to continue to offset the effects of air pressure, wind speed, and low temperature. Fortunately, when the flying height just exceeded 10,000 meters, the dragon stopped climbing and shuttled through the thick clouds like a child. In this regard, Zhang Fengjai did not stop the dragon from playing, but looked down at the ground. But the result made him feel very helpless and depressed. Even with the help of Danshan's spiritual power, the distance of vision could not break through the limit of 10,000 meters. In his eyes, Ningji City was just a black dot slightly larger than a soybean. Fortunately, the pride of being above the sky and the pleasure of shuttling between the clouds quickly made him eliminate his depressed mood, and then he appreciated the strange clouds in the sky at an altitude of 10,000 meters. At this time, on a passenger plane about 10,000 meters away from the dragon playing, Wang Mixue, who was near the window of the plane, looked at the clouds of different shapes condensed outside the window, and a look of worry appeared in her eyes. But at this moment, in the 3 rows of seats in front of her, a little girl about 7 or 8 years old suddenly pointed out the window and shouted loudly, "Mom, look, there's a dragon outside." "Sissy, that's not a real dragon, it's just a cloud that changes into a dragon shape." A beautiful woman with a plump figure, outstanding appearance, and elegant temperament chuckled and retorted, "Mom, it's not a dragon that turned into a cloud, it's a real dragon, a dragon that can ride on clouds and mist, and there's a person standing on the dragon's head." After hearing her mother's rebuttal, the little girl immediately explained anxiously, "Perhaps in the ancient and medieval times of China, there might be giant dragons. In the end of the Law era, when immortals and gods are extinct and spiritual energy is scarce, giant dragons and immortals are all legendary existences." Therefore, Wang Mixue, who also did not believe that the little girl could see a real dragon, chuckled and shook her head, intending to continue to enjoy the scenery outside the window. Her eyes immediately widened, and an extremely shocked look appeared in her eyes. Because just a few hundred meters in the sky ahead, a giant dragon with a body length of more than 100 meters was shuttling through the thick clouds like a gust of wind. What made Wang Mixue even more unbelievable was that between the 2 horns of the dragon's head stood a thin boy with extraordinary temperament. Perhaps because of her daughter's strong request, the beautiful woman had to look out from the window sill. Then, the beautiful woman suddenly screamed in shock, "Dragon!" The beautiful woman's scream immediately attracted the attention of other passengers, and they all stood up and wanted to squeeze to the window sill to watch. However, several flight attendants who appeared in time stopped the passengers in the cabin from risking their lives and began to propose a way to exchange seats to satisfy all passengers to see the real dragon with their own eyes. After all, they also wanted to see the legendary real dragon with their own eyes, as well as the thin boy standing at the dragon's head. Because the distance between them was hundreds of meters, and their attention was focused on the strange clouds, Zhang Fengjai did not care about the passenger plane that was about to fly past the dragon. However, when the passenger plane and the dragon were at the same level, and the figures in the cabin were walking back and forth, he finally realized that he had become the monkey that others were watching, which made him feel very unhappy. At the same time, he reached out and patted Long Jiao's instructions. "Senior, it's almost time, we should go back." Knowing that Zhang Fengjai suddenly asked to return to the ground because of the passenger plane not far away, the dragon, who had not yet had enough fun, also felt unhappy and couldn't help but roar at the passenger plane. Ah! After roaring angrily, the dragon swung its tail and left the sky, flying towards Ningji city. Just as the dragon planted Zhang Fengjai out of the clouds and turned his head to look at the passenger plane, Wang Yixue, who had returned to the window seat, just saw his appearance clearly and remembered it deeply in his mind. When his body rushed down quickly and reached 1,000 meters above Ningji city, Zhang Fengjai reached out and patted Long Jiao's instructions. "Senior, take me for a flight." Although he didn't like the feeling of flying at low altitude, facing Zhang Fengjai's request, the dragon did not refuse and flew around Ningji city and its 12 subordinate counties and districts. This also allowed Zhang Fengjai to remember more than a dozen terrains with special feng shui patterns. Afterwards, he ordered the dragon to fly back to Tianren Hospital. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yuanqi. Chapter 383. In mid-air in Ningji city. Just when the giant dragon was still 200 to 300 meters away from Tianren Hospital, Zhang Fengjai suddenly saw Gu Yuanxian step by step forcing Bai Jinjiao, who was leaning against the corner in the aisle of a hotel. Although the Taoist silver needle was hidden in Bai Jinjiao's hair in advance, if the Taoist silver needle wanted to work, it would either have to be when Bai Jinjiao was in danger of life, or it would have been driven by his own thoughts. At this time, Bai Jinjiao had just begun to encounter danger, and had not yet reached the level where the Taoist silver needle was activated. Just now, his mind was completely immersed in the flying high in the sky, and he did not sense Bai Jinjiao's safety through the Taoist silver needle. However, since it has been encountered and seen now, there is no need to use means of hiding it in advance. Zhang Fengjai reached out and patted the dragon's horn to signal the dragon to descend several hundred meters, and lowered its head slightly. Zhang Fengjai warned indifferently. Gu Yuanxian, if you dare to take a step closer to Bai Jinjiao, believe it or not, I will turn you into a eunuch who will never marry you. Hearing the threatening voice above their heads, Gu Yuanxian and Bai Jinjiao looked up at the same time. Afterwards, Gu Yuanxian fell to the ground with a face as pale as paper, with a look of horror in his eyes. Whether it was stepping on the legendary dragon or the various methods he had just displayed at Tianren Hospital, he knew that the young man named Zhang Fengjai in front of him was a terrifying existence that he could never provoke. At this moment, the other party had seen what he had done to Bai Jinjiao, and he was worried that the other party would take the opportunity to kill him. Although Bai Jinjiao felt a sweet feeling of happiness in her heart, it was instantly overshadowed by heartbreaking grief, so she looked at Zhang Fengjai, who was standing on a giant dragon, like a legendary god, with a complicated look in her eyes. Well. After noticing the complicated look in Bai Jinjiao's eyes, Zhang Fengjai couldn't help but sigh and waved. Then, a silver needle exuding a hint of chill flew out of her hair. Seeing the silver needles flying out of her hair, the complicated look in Bai Jinjiao's eyes was instantly replaced by emotion, and she quickly asked. Yezi, when did you hide the silver needle in my hair? Just when you were leaving the hospital in a daze. In response to this, Zhang Fengjai did not have any hidden reply. While taking the Taoist silver needle back into the sea of consciousness, he took out a sachet from his pocket and introduced it. Jinjiao, the green silk sachet you gave me has been with me for 4 years. It contains not only the power of my mind and the blood of my heart, but also the incense of the Sanking Patriarch in the Taoist temple. Then, he threw the sachet to Bai Jinjiao and warned. In the future, whether you are going out or studying in the academy, you must carry the sachet with you, because it can not only deter the approach of evil things, but also save your life when you are in danger. Seeing Bai Jinjiao carefully putting away the sachet, Zhang Fengjai turned his eyes to Gu Yuanxian, who was lying on the ground with a look of horror in his eyes, and threatened him coldly. Gu Yuanxian, I will temporarily spare your life today, but the death penalty can be avoided, but the living crime cannot be forgiven. What do you want to do? Whether it is a traditional martial arts novel or an online novel full of fantasy, as long as the protagonist says that death penalty can be avoided but living crime cannot be forgiven, it means that the supporting character is about to suffer inhumane torture. Therefore, when Gu Yuanxian heard Zhang Fengjai's threat, he shouted in fear and kept backing away with his hands on the ground. After mobilizing the spiritual power of his Danshan, he fired a powerful force that directly hit an acupuncture point on Gu Yuanxian's abdomen. Zhang Fengjai reached out and gently tapped the dragon's horn as a sign to leave, leaving behind the specific content of the punishment method just now. Gu Yuanxian, because of your unruly act against Jinjiao just now, if Yang Qi does not rise within 3 years, Long Yang will not rise. As a top student in a medical school, Gu Yuanxian certainly knows the meaning of the lack of Yang Qi and Long Yang. This also makes him from a superior family background, outstanding personal conditions, and never lack of women around him. I suddenly felt endless humiliation and despair. Bai Jinjiao, who also knew the meaning of the punishment conditions, hurriedly ran out of the aisle with a blushing face, then looked up at Zhang Fengjai, who was stepping on a giant dragon, and slowly landed in the courtyard of Tianren Hospital, with a look in his eyes. He asked himself with a confused look. Jinjiao, Jinjiao, I love Yezi I can't forget Yezi and I won't leave Yezi but I don't accept that he has another woman. What do you think I should do next? Senior, if you don't want to have your consciousness controlled by others in the future, it's best to transfer the source of the dragon's veins that condenses your consciousness to the underground of Baiko Pavilion. Just after the dragon landed steadily in the courtyard of Tianren Hospital, Zhang Fengjai jumped off the dragon's head and suggested. First of all, Baiko Pavilion is a pharmacy that sells traditional Chinese medicine. It can better gather the luck of the Chinese land and help you get rid of the fake promotion dragon vein as soon as possible. Secondly, I have a good relationship with Ye Xianyuan, the boss of Baiko Pavilion. When you encounter trouble in the future, I will be able to help you in time. After hearing Zhang Fengjai's proposal, the dragon's huge eyes showed a thoughtful look. And Ye Xianyuan, who rushed to the gate of Tianren Hospital, when she heard Mr. Hu mention the amazing changes and infinite benefits that dragon vein consciousness can bring, she immediately looked at the dragon with clenched fists and a look in her eyes. A look of intense longing. The wealthy sister He Jingshang, who was standing not far from Ye Xianyuan, cast her eyes on Qin Beizang, who was lying flat on the cement floor of the hospital, with a look of determination flashing in her eyes. After pondering for nearly a minute, the giant dragon nodded its mountain-like dragon head and slowly sank into the ground. Then, endless white smoke suddenly emerged on the cement floor of the entire hospital. When the white smoke quickly shrank and disappeared again, what made countless people at the scene feel incredible was that the main building and 4 auxiliary buildings that had disappeared, as well as the pine, cypress, and osmanthus trees in the courtyard, had returned to their original state. Then, from the hundreds of windows of the main building, purple lights emerged one after another, and gradually formed into a large traditional Chinese dragon character. Then, the traditional Chinese dragon character soared into the sky above Baiko Pavilion, and then automatically exploded into purple rain, which merged into Baiko Pavilion one after another. Looking at the purple rain that kept dripping and merging into Baiko Pavilion, Ye Xianyuan took 3 deep breaths in succession, barely suppressing the excited tears in her eyes, and then turned her head to discuss with Mr. Hu. Mr. Hu, I want to give half of the shares of Baiko Pavilion to Ye Zi. Mr. Ye, A hermit like Zhang Xiao can be said to regard money as dirt. I think he will definitely not accept the shares you give him. Mr. Hu shook his head and rejected it. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuqi. Chapter 384. Tianren Hospital, at the entrance. When Mr. Hu gave the reason for his objection, Ye Xianyun pointed at the purple rain above Baiko Pavilion and asked with a frown. Mr. Hu, how can I repay Ye Zi for his kindness? Simple. Mr. Hu reminded with confidence on his face. As long as Mr. Ye tries his best to find some exotic flowers and herbs that are old enough when purchasing medicinal materials in the future, I think Mr. Zhang will accept them with satisfaction and will bear in mind your thoughts. I see. After hearing Mr. Hu's reminder, Ye Xianyun nodded with a hint of understanding in her eyes, then lowered her head and began to recall the medicinal materials market she had visited before Baiko Pavilion opened. Because she vaguely remembered that there was a time-honored shop in the market. The shop owner once mentioned that he had 2 precious medicinal plants that were thousands of years old, but she couldn't remember the specific types and prices of those 2 precious medicinal materials at the moment. But at this moment, Zhang Fenjai's voice of greeting suddenly came to her ears. Mr. Ye, please come over here. After hearing Zhang Fenjai's greeting, Ye Xianyun ran to him quickly without any hesitation. Mr. Ye, how much money can you provide now? After hearing Zhang Fenjai's question, Ye Xianyun thought for a while and then replied. Ye Zi, I still have 2 million in liquidity in my account. However, if you are in urgent need, I can sell some of the group's shares and raise 5,000 in the shortest time. After directly interrupting Ye Xianyun's smart sacrifice, Zhang Fenjai walked up to Qin Beizang, who was lying on the cement floor, then squatted in front of him and suggested. How about 2 million and a short period of time to recover from physical injuries in exchange for the property rights of the Baiko Pavilion store? After hearing Zhang Fenjai's proposal, Ye Xianyun's expression was suddenly shaken, and at the same time, she looked at him with a complicated expression. The rich sister He Jingshang, who was standing at the door of the hospital, couldn't help but change her face, and looked at Zhang Fenjai with a look of resentment. Make a deal. Although Danshan was abolished, turning him into a powerless ordinary person, but with the connections and wealth accumulated over the years, he could still enjoy the most luxurious glory and wealth forever. What's more, he knew that the Supernatural Research Institute had successfully developed a drug that could quickly expand the Danshan, and he could use that drug to regain his lost power. Therefore, facing Zhang Fenjai's proposal, Qin Beizang nodded in agreement without any hesitation. After getting Qin Beizang's consent, Zhang Fenjai took out 5 ordinary silver needles from his sleeves, and then used Suangi's 13 needles to erase the damage caused by the destruction of Danshan. Then, he stood up and gave Ye Xianyun solemn instructions. Mr. Ye, handle the store transfer procedures as quickly as possible to avoid unpredictable changes. No problem. Being able to guess what Zhang Fenjai was talking about, Ye Xianyun nodded quickly. I have an acquaintance in the housing management office, and I can complete the property rights change procedures this afternoon. Since Ye Xianyun already knew it, Zhang Fenjai didn't say anything more. Immediately afterwards, he reached out to lift up the unconscious Gu Zixuan, walked out of the hospital to the side of the road, and then waited silently. The waiting time was not very long, only about 3 minutes, and a black SVU commercial vehicle parked in front of him. Zhang Fenjai drove into the car, closed the door and gave instructions. Sister Yan, go back to the villa directly. Ever since they broke through that level of intimate relationship, Zhang Fenjai's name for Zhuang Jian has changed from the polite teacher Zhuang to the more intimate sister Yan. Zhuang Jian immediately started the car and left the hospital. After turning an intersection, she looked at Zhang Fenjai through the rearview mirror, her eyes full of admiration and praise. Stepping on a giant dragon, flying proudly in the sky, like a god descending. Yi Zi, you were so handsome just now. Sister Yan, the sensation caused by the birth of Dragon Vein is completely beyond my expectation at the beginning. Do you think it will have a bad impact? Ignoring Zhuang Jian's admiring praise, Zhang Fengjai asked slightly worriedly. After hearing Zhang Fengjai's inquiry, Zhuang Jian put away her excitement and couldn't help but explain with a wry smile. Yezi, I don't know about other places, but for our Ningji city, let alone the birth of the giant dragon with condensed dragon veins just now, even if a god descends from the sky, I'm afraid it won't cause much of a sensation. Why? Zhang Fengjai asked in confusion. Because some time ago, you used the secret methods of Kunlun and Longhu Mountain to intercept and kill the ancient line of the Gukang sect in front of the Dihao Entertainment City. This has completely changed the people of Ningji City from their belief in atheism. There are even many elderly people who have begun to worship the tablets of Sanking Taoist and Guanyin Bodhisattva at home to pray for the happiness and health of themselves and their families. If you search the internet now, you will find that there are at least dozens of forums in Ningji City discussing immortals, gods, and monsters. The explanation Zhuang Jian gave just now made Zhang Fengjai frown even more and ask. Sister Yan, hasn't your Supernatural Research Institute thought of a way to cover it up? After the bitter smile on her face was replaced by depression, Zhuang Jian said in a rather helpless tone. If there were supernatural phenomena in other cities, the leaders of the institute would have used secular administrative power to explain and cover up, ensuring that no clues about supernatural phenomena would be leaked. Only for the supernatural phenomena in Ningji City, the leaders of the institute seem to have completely given up. Not only will they not deliberately cover it up, but they will not send any support to you and me in the future. After hearing the laissez-faire attitude of the Supernatural Research Institute towards Ningji City, Zhang Fengjai closed his eyes and leaned back in his chair, carefully pondering the meaning of the Supernatural Research Institute's actions. If it were in an era when the media and the internet were not developed, this laissez-faire attitude might be explained clearly. It's nothing more than some important leaders in the Supernatural Research Institute still hate themselves, wanting them to be in the limelight and cause trouble, and then use some monsters that they don't like to deal with themselves. In this way, it can not only reduce the losses of the Supernatural Research Institute, but also avoid direct conflicts with the backers behind them. But with the rapid development of society and the pervasiveness of media and the internet, people can know what is happening in the world without leaving their homes. The laissez-faire attitude of the Supernatural Research Institute is not announcing the existence of demons and monsters to the world. Don't they worry about causing social unrest? Don't they care about the confidentiality agreement signed between the Supernatural Research Institute, the Taoist sect and the demon beasts? The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuqi. Chapter 385. What's the use of this iron rod? What's the use of this transformation? Just when Zhang Fengjai was thinking hard about the real reason why the Supernatural Research Institute gave up Ningji City, a pleasant mobile phone ringtone suddenly rang in the car. After taking out the phone and looking at the caller's number, Zhuang Jian's face changed slightly and she quickly parked the car on the side of the road, then answered the phone and talked to the other party. The conversation was not very long, only about 30 seconds. Zhuang Jian, who hung up the phone, turned around with a serious face and reminded. Yezi, the person who just talked to me is a colleague of the Supernatural Research Institute who is responsible for collecting intelligence in Dongshan Province. She is also a close friend of mine. According to the information she just received, among the 16 cities under the jurisdiction of Dongshan Province, there are a large number of monsters in the foundation building realm, as well as feng shui masters who are proficient in yin and yang and the 5 elements. They have left their retreats and rushed to Ningji City. It is estimated that the number of monsters and feng shui masters is at least more than 60. The only thing that can alarm all the monsters and feng shui masters in all the cities in a province at the same time is the emergence of the giant dragon condensed by the pseudo-dragon vein just now. Therefore, after hearing the news from Zhuang Jian's colleague, Zhang Fengjai's face gradually darkened. he was not too worried about the arrival of a large number of Feng Shui masters. First of all, the pseudo-dragon vein consciousness that has been restrained by the geomantic ruler and the Feng Shui formation will not be easily controlled by the Feng Shui master. Secondly, the dragon veins were formed after thousands of years of terrain changes. They could not be moved as a whole, nor could they be easily destroyed. Those Feng Shui masters probably wanted to improve their Feng Shui skills by observing the terrain changes of the pseudo-dragon veins. Thirdly, the cultivation of Feng Shui masters was generally not very high. Even if they wanted to frame him and the pseudo-dragon veins with evil intentions, the chance of success was probably close to zero. Now the only thing that worried him was the monsters. Firstly, the monsters were violent and cruel. Would they conflict with the local monsters in Ningji City and hurt the ordinary people in Ningji City? This was an unexpected event that no one could predict. Secondly, the strong flesh and blood body made the monsters in the same realm much stronger than the cultivators. With his current cultivation and strength, unless he used the trump card to save his life, he could not kill the monsters in the foundation building realm. Third, since the monsters come from different cities, the time they finally reach Ningji City must be different. So, with only a few trump cards, it is probably impossible to kill all the invading monsters at the same time. Yezi, do you want me to take you back to Shushan Zhongshan? After Sulitzi came back from the Zhang family in Shushan, she once vaguely mentioned that Zhang Fengjai had 3 grandfathers who were like gods. So, when she saw his gloomy face that seemed to drip water, Zhuang Jian couldn't help but remind him. No. Now it has just been 10 days since the Mid-Autumn Festival. With the temperament of the great-grandfather and the third grandfather, it is probably the time when they are most angry. If I go back to the Zhang family in Shushan at this time, wouldn't it be a trap for me to be abused? Moreover, the first target of those monsters and Feng Shui masters who come to Ningji City must be the pseudo-dragon veins, which are not too threatening to themselves. Therefore, Zhang Fengjai quickly shook his head to reject Zhuang Jian's proposal, and motioned her to drive back to the villa, and then closed his eyes and began to think about how to deal with the monsters and Feng Shui masters who were coming. In fact, the giant dragon condensed by the pseudo-dragon veins, which has reached the peak of the 9th level of foundation building, can easily deal with those monsters and Feng Shui masters. However, the process of condensing the giant dragon requires a lot of dragon vein power. It takes at least 1 day and 1 night of recovery time before the giant dragon can be condensed again. In this case, the pseudo-dragon vein can only be used as a killer for the final turnaround. If the life-saving trump card is used, then it is necessary to use the means of delaying until all the monsters are gathered together, and then use the life-saving trump card to kill them all. But 2 conditions must be met. The first condition is that the specific number of monsters must be known before the time to use the life-saving trump card can be determined. The second condition is how to delay the gathering of monsters. Thinking of this, Zhang Fengjai opened his eyes and looked at Zhuang Jian and asked, "Sister Yan, can you trouble your best friend to help me check the number of monsters that have arrived in Ningji City this time, as well as their strength?" "No problem." After nodding in agreement, Zhuang Jian immediately took out her phone and started to contact her best friend. After nearly 3 minutes of talking, she gave a very detailed answer. "Yezi, the number of monsters that came to Ningji City this time reached 48, among which the number of snakes and cats was the largest. The strongest monster was the blue-striped giant python from the shore of Daming Lake in the provincial capital, and its cultivation reached the peak of the 8th level of foundation building. There are more snakes and cats?" When Zhang Fengjai heard the specific information given by Zhuang Jian, a gleam of light flashed in his eyes, and he already knew the life-saving trump card he needed to use next. Afterwards, he continued to consider the means and things he needed to prepare to delay the gathering of monsters. With his relationship with the pseudo-dragon vein, he should be able to use the power of the underground dragon vein, So the next step is to arrange a feng shui formation that can be used to confuse and trap the monsters. Thinking of this, Zhang Fengjie continued to give instructions to Zhuang Jian. Sister Yan, please help me prepare 10,000 pieces of high-quality talisman paper, 730 drops of pure yang spring water, 365 peach seeds, 365 round soybeans, 180 short silver nails, and 9 green snake skins, and then send them to the main building of Tianren Hospital. After hearing what Zhang Fengjie asked her to prepare, Zhuang Jian thought carefully for a while, then took out her mobile phone and made a few calls, and then nodded and replied. No problem, give me 3 hours to prepare. Whether it was the life-saving trump card he was going to use or the things he asked Zhuang Jian to prepare, they were the only ways he could think of to deal with monsters and feng shui masters so far. As for whether he could successfully resolve the monster crisis in the end, it all depended on luck. Afterwards, he cast his eyes on Gu Zixuan who had fainted, and after a cold light flashed in his eyes, he began to search him from all sides. After a thorough search, he found a total of 72 sharp knives of different sizes from Gu Zixuan's sleeves, trouser legs, belt and chest. Seeing the pile of sharp knives placed on the chair, he finally understood why Gu Zixuan was called the Thousand Knives Prince. Of course, in addition to the 72 sharp knives, he also found an exquisite porcelain bottle, 2 jade pendants with giant python sculptures, and 5 slightly old talismans from the other party's sleeves. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuqi. Chapter 386. After taking a quick look at the 5 talismans and finding that they were just the most common soul-fixing talismans, Zhang Fengjie threw them directly to Zhuang Jian, who was driving, and told her the function of the soul-fixing talisman. Then, he pulled out the stopper of the porcelain bottle with force and poured out the pills inside. Soul-devouring pill. When Zhang Fengjie saw the pills, which were dark red in color, the size of cherries, and exuding an alluring aroma, his face changed slightly and he quickly put them into the porcelain bottle. Soul-devouring pills are made from the corpses of gu insects cultivated by the Miao people in southern Xinjiang. They can be used to control people's thinking and consciousness, making the other party completely become their slaves, just like the soul-devouring gu that Zhujiang used to control Shen Loxi. The only difference is that soul-devouring pills will not harm the life of the controlled person. So, after a thoughtful look flashed in Zhang Fengjie's eyes, he put the porcelain bottle containing the soul-devouring pill into his sleeve. Afterwards, he picked up the 2 jade pendants of the giant python statue and took a look at them. He found that they were exactly the same as the jade pendants that chased him and Zhuang Jian, and then gave both jade pendants to Zhuang Jian. Next, he chatted with Zhuang Jian while rushing to the villa in Guanghe Huafu. When the black SUV stopped at the door of villa number 7, Zhang Fengjie carried Gu Zixuan into the villa and found that the villa was still empty, so he went back to his guest room. Then, he took out 5 silver needles and performed the Suangi 13 needle method to protect the dantian that was shattered by the power of the dragon vein and the injured heart vein, ensuring that Gu Zixuan would not die for a while. Then, his consciousness connected a Taoist silver needle in the sea of consciousness and pierced directly into Gu Zixuan's eyebrows to prevent him from mastering the secret method of recovery that he did not know and then taking the opportunity to escape. After doing all this, he walked to the windowsill and began to tap the windowsill gently with his right hand. Bang, bang, bang. Accompanied by the sound of knocking on the windowsill, the ground under a holly tree in the villa yard suddenly turned over, and then a blood-red, nearly 30-centimeter long centipede crawled out from the ground. Looking up at Zhang Fengjie standing in front of the windowsill, the centipede rushed up to the windowsill as fast as the wind, and then wrapped around his arm. Not bad. Seeing that the centipede not only successfully entered the ranks of monsters, but also reached the peak of the first level of foundation building. Zhang Fengjai nodded with satisfaction. However, when he thought of the little black dog that he also brought out from Lala village and finally chose to leave alone, a trace of regret flashed in his eyes. After all, judging from the bloodline and potential, the little black dog's future achievements may be higher. He shook his head gently, forcibly expelled the thought of the little black dog from his mind, turned around and came to the bedside, then pulled out a box from under the bed, took out an exquisite porcelain bottle from the box, and instructed the centipede. Zioxiu, I'm in a little trouble now, and I need your 3 drops of life essence blood. Although life essence blood is related to one's own foundation and strength, it cannot be lost easily, but in the face of Zhang Fengjai's order, the centipede spit out 3 drops of blood that exuded a fishy smell and vaguely showed 3 colors without any hesitation. Seeing the centipede spitting out 3 drops of life essence blood, not only was its expression listless, but the color of its body also dimmed. It immediately put away the porcelain bottle with some heartache, and then took out the 70-year-old ginseng given by Bai Jiang from the box. Zioxiu, quickly swallow this ginseng to replenish your blood. The 70-year-old ginseng, including the ginseng whiskers, is about 15 or 16 centimeters long, which is undoubtedly a giant for the 1,000-legged blood centipede, whose body is less than 30 centimeters long. Therefore, Zhang Fengjai cut the ginseng into more than a dozen pieces and placed them on the bed, letting the 1,000-legged blood centipede slowly swallow and enjoy it. He got up and left the client and returned to the business car, and then asked Zhuang Jian to send him back to Tianren Hospital. Whether it was the damage caused by the false dragon vein when it revealed its true form, or the sinister intention of Ding Qin to use the monopoly of the Feng Shui pattern, it foreshadowed the closure of Tianren Hospital. Therefore, when Zhang Fengjai returned to Tianren Hospital, he found that the entire hospital had long been empty without a single person. And such an environment was just right for him to set up a Feng Shui formation to delay the monster beast and the Feng Shui master. After watching the black business car leave the hospital, Zhang Fengjai walked to the main building of the hospital, and then bent his knees and sat cross-legged on the cement floor where he had fought. Afterwards, while waiting for Zhuang Jian to deliver the items needed to arrange the Feng Shui formation, he used his consciousness to communicate with the pseudo-dragon vein so that he could make use of the large amount of dragon vein power gathered underground. At this time, it was just 6:30 in the afternoon, which was the peak time for getting off work. At this time, on the road facing the hospital gate, pedestrians flowed like water and cars were like dragons. But no matter whether it was pedestrians passing by or passers-by who stopped to observe the hospital, no one saw Zhang Fengjai sitting cross-legged in front of the main building, as if he didn't exist at all. And this is why he contacted the pseudo-dragon vein consciousness immediately after arriving at Tianren Hospital. Because of the sensation caused by the pseudo-dragon vein condensing the giant dragon and the practice of the Supernatural Research Institute completely abandoning Ningji City, the supernatural phenomenon has begun to gradually affect the lives of ordinary people in Ningji City, which also made him very regretful to choose to crack the monopoly of Feng Shui pattern during the day. If the action to break the dominance of the Feng Shui pattern is carried out in the early morning, there will not be so many onlookers, and he will not become a target in the limelight, and even less will he alarm the monsters and Feng Shui masters in the city. Therefore, he will let the pseudo-dragon vein mobilize the power of the dragon vein to conceal his figure and breath, so as to avoid attracting the attention of passers-by. Through the communication of consciousness, Zhang Fengjai let the pseudo-dragon vein disperse its own consciousness, which can not only avoid being controlled by those Feng Shui masters who are proficient in yin and yang and the 5 elements, but also discover the traces of the monsters coming to Ningji City in advance. After the Mid-Autumn Festival, the moon is crescent. As the night falls, there is no bright crescent moon of the Mid-Autumn Festival, leaving the entire Tianren Hospital in complete darkness. After signaling the pseudo-dragon vein to disperse the dragon vein power that enveloped him, Zhang Fengjai stood up and surrounded the entire hospital wall, and began to look for a suitable array point for arranging the feng shui array. To do this, he spent nearly 40 minutes. When he returned to the main building of the hospital, he found that Zhuang Jian had already placed everything he needed on the cement floor in front of the main building. "Yezi, let me stay." Looking at Zhang Fengjai, who had returned to the main building, Zhuang Jian asked with a look of desire in her eyes. "No." Zhang Fengjai shook his head and refused without even thinking about it. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuqi. Chapter 387. Tianren Hospital, Front Yard. Zhang Fengjai flatly refused Zhuang Jian's stay because he was not sure whether the feng shui formation he arranged could last until all 48 monsters gathered and he could use his life-saving trump card. If the feng shui formation was forcibly broken by the monsters, he could choose to break through with the advantage of his life-saving trump card and speed, but he could not guarantee that he could protect Zhuang Jian's safety 100% during the breakout. After all, among the 48 monsters that appeared in Ningji City this time, there were both blue-striped giant pythons with the strength to reach the peak of the 8th level of foundation building, and poisonous monsters that carried deadly poison. Okay. Zhuang Jian, who could feel the decisiveness in Zhang Fengjai's refusal tone and knew that she could not stay, could only nod in agreement helplessly, and exhorted her with concern. "Yezi, pay attention to safety, and don't show off." "Sister Yan, I know." After nodding, Zhang Fengjai bent down to pick up the things Zhuang Jian sent, and then walked towards the hospital wall to arrange the feng shui formation. With the help of the power of the dragon vein, in just 10 minutes, earth talismans that could form a defense were drawn on 10,000 pieces of talisman paper, and then buried under the base of the hospital wall. 365 peach tree seeds and 365 round soybeans were buried in the courtyard of the hospital according to the trajectory of the stars, and 2 drops of pure yang spring water were dripped on each. As for the 108 short nails made of pure silver, they were all buried in the 4 corners of the main building. After doing all this, Zhang Fengjai sat cross-legged on the cement floor in front of the main building again, running the mind method slowly while waiting for the monster and the feng shui master to come. At 11 o'clock in the evening, the silence above Tianren Hospital was suddenly broken by the sound of a rapidly flying bird. Then, a giant owl with a dark brown-gray body slowly landed in front of the hospital entrance. After sweeping the hospital with golden eyes, it finally stopped on Zhang Fengjai. Slowly opening his eyes and looking at the owl, Zhang Fengjai took out an old talisman from his sleeve, and challenged with disdain in his eyes. A fierce murderous aura immediately flashed in his golden eyes, and the owl flapped its wings and slowly rose into the air, intending to swallow the human who dared to provoke him. But at this moment, 2 rapid sounds of breaking through the air made it stop flapping its wings immediately, and landed on the ground again, looking up at the sky. Then, a black crow, whose body was as big as the owl, and a white snake with 2 feathers on its back slowly landed behind the owl. "Wow wow!" Hiss. "Ouch!" Then, the black crow, the double-feathered white snake and the grey owl glared at each other and protested through their calls. Zhang Fengjai couldn't help but pray secretly, praying that they could fight immediately and die together in the end. Meow, meow. But unfortunately, just when the 3 flying monsters were about to attack, a cat demon with green light in its eyes interrupted the tense atmosphere on the scene, and also made the 3 flying monsters put away the murderous intent on their bodies, and then turned to look at Zhang Fengjai, who was sitting cross-legged in front of the main building. It was a pity, but Zhang Fengjai was not too disappointed. After all, he had not thought of using the means of internal fighting among monsters to solve this crisis at the beginning. Seeing that the 4 monsters were staring at him with fierce and murderous eyes, he mobilized the spiritual power in his dantian to drive the spell, and 2 luxury cars stopped in front of the hospital. Afterwards, 2 old men in Taoist robes with silver hair got out of the car, and 4 middle-aged men holding weapons condensed with spiritual power and also wearing Taoist robes. When Zhang Fengjai saw the four middle-aged men in Taoist robes who had reached the foundation building stage, his face changed slightly, and he immediately realized that he had overlooked a very serious problem. Even though the Feng Shui master's cultivation is not high, he can use the Feng Shui methods of yin-yang and the five elements to find a large number of exotic flowers and plants in the Feng Shui treasure land, so he will definitely be able to meet many powerful foundation building masters with profound cultivation. In this way, when they come to the unknown dangerous pseudo-dragon vein, they will definitely invite powerful friends who can protect them. And with the Feng Shui formation just arranged, it is already very difficult to resist 48 monsters in the foundation building realm. If facing dozens of cultivators in the foundation building realm, then the Feng Shui formation can last for 30 minutes, which is already a heaven-defying luck. However, while blaming himself for being careless, Zhang Fengjai couldn't help but have a little doubt in his heart. Those Feng Shui masters who called their friends, did they really just want to take a look at the Feng Shui pattern of the pseudo-dragon vein and use it to improve their Feng Shui skills? Although the four monsters were very powerful, they were protected by even stronger foundation building masters. The two old men in Taoist robes walked to the hospital's automatically retracting door without fear, and then began to observe the Feng Shui trend of the entire hospital. Facing the human cultivators who dared to despise them so much, the four monsters looked at each other with hostility in their eyes, and immediately turned around to kill the four middle-aged men in Taoist robes in the foundation building realm. The four middle-aged men in Taoist robes, who had been ready for action, immediately went up to them with excitement. Seeing the four monsters and four cultivators suddenly fighting, Zhang Fengjai vaguely felt that things were not as pessimistic as he had imagined. Especially judging from the desperate fight between the two parties, who were willing to consume a lot of spiritual power and demonic power, perhaps the means that he had arranged in advance might not be used in the end. I am Guanshan, I am here to meet you, Taoist friend. I am Duanshan, I am here to meet you, Taoist friend. After a rough observation of the Feng Shui pattern of the hospital, the two white-haired old men in Taoist robes, who already had a rough idea, bowed with one hand to greet each other. Junior Kingxiu, I meet Senior Guanshan, I meet Senior Duanshan. Before confirming the other party's true intention, Zhang Fengjai didn't want to turn against the other party, so he quickly stood up and returned the greeting. Hearing the word Su in Zhang Fengjai's Taoist name, Guanshan and Duanshan looked at each other, and Guanshan asked solemnly, I wonder what sect or school Taoist Kingxiu came from, and which senior is your master? When Gu Zixuan and Qin Beizang heard their Taoist names, they immediately concluded that they were true disciples of Longhu Mountain, one of the 10 major Taoist sects, which made Zhang Fengjai immediately realize that his Taoist name must be unusual. Although he didn't want to use the name of the 10 major Taoist sects, from the current situation, the identity of a true disciple of Longhu Mountain would help solve today's crisis. So, in response to Guanshan's question, Zhang Fengjai directly used his spiritual power to drive the talisman in his hand. Then, a lion with a cultivation base of the 6th level of foundation building rushed out from the smoke of the talisman. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuqi. Chapter 388. Tianren Hospital, Front Yard. His own cultivation is only the 9th level of Qi condensation, but he has the top level spell that can transform into a 6th level heroic beast. At this time, Zhang Fengjai no longer needs to make any introductions. Guanshan and Duanshan have determined that he is the true disciple of Longhu Mountain. At this moment, facing the true disciple of Longhu Mountain, who ranks third among the 10 major Taoist sects, Guanshan and Duanshan immediately want to turn around and leave. After all, as older Feng Shui masters, they are very clear about the arrogance and domineering of sect disciples, as well as the unreasonable protection of sects. However, thinking of the rare treasures contained in the pseudo-dragon vein that can condense the true body of the giant dragon, they are unwilling to leave. Just when Guanshan and Duanshan were in a dilemma, the sound of heavy objects falling to the ground suddenly came from behind. Bang! Turning around suddenly, Guanshan and Duanshan saw that the cat demon among the four demon beasts was stabbed in the heart by a middle-aged strong man in the foundation building realm. Originally, in a 4-on-4 situation, the four demon beasts were already completely at a disadvantage. At this time, without the important helper of the cat demon, they were no match for the four middle-aged men in Taoist robes. So, after the remaining three flying demon beasts looked at each other, they immediately flapped their wings and feathers and flew into the air, and then fled directly to the north of Ningji city. After losing the threat of the demon beasts, with four powerful helpers in the foundation building realm, the hesitation in Guanshan and Duanshan's eyes was instantly replaced by determination, and Guanshan turned to discuss with Zhang Fengjai. Fellow Daoist Kingxiu, how about you, me, and brother Duanshan each get one of the rare treasures in the pseudo-dragon vein? Faced with the distribution plan proposed by Guanshan, Zhang Fengjai pretended to consider it, and began to recall the information about the dragon vein in his mind, looking for the treasures contained in the pseudo-dragon vein. Gathering the five elements, integrating yin and yang, embracing the heaven and earth, seizing the sun and the moon, and fixing the crystal stone, can be called a dragon vein. When he thought of the incomplete travel notes in the Taoist temple, which recorded the specific process of the formation of the dragon vein, and mentioned that the crystal stone containing pure spiritual power would be cultivated at the position of the dragon vein's reverse scale, he finally understood why the Feng Shui masters from the 16 cities and prefectures of Dongshan province rushed here. When he thought that the pseudo-dragon vein with only 20% to 30% of the charm of the real dragon vein could only cultivate 2 to 3 dragon crystals at most, Zhang Fengjai immediately had the idea of taking it all for himself. Of course, the premise is to deal with the 6 people watching the mountain in front of him, as well as the monsters and Feng Shui masters who kept coming. So, after a brief and careful consideration, he gave his own temporary opinion. If it's 3 pieces, 1 for each person. If it's 2 pieces, I'll get 1 for myself. With the noble status of a true disciple of Longhu Mountain, it is not excessive to ask for a single dragon crystal. At the same time, the other party could see the number of dragon crystals that the pseudo-dragon vein could eventually cultivate, indicating that the other party was also a Feng Shui master who was proficient in yin and yang and the 5 elements. So, after a brief eye contact, Guanshan nodded in agreement on behalf of Duanshan. Then, when they were about to enter the hospital, a sharp brake sound suddenly came from behind them. But at this moment, a dazzling red Ferrari sports car quickly stopped in front of the 2 luxury cars. Then, a beautiful girl wearing long boots, a mini skirt, and a dark waist-length gown walked down from the slowly opened car door. Dongfang Wan'er. When he saw the beautiful girl's devilishly sexy figure and angelic pure face, Guanshan whispered to himself with a gloomy face. Wan'er meets the 2 seniors. Walking with her slender and charming white legs, Dongfang Wan'er came in front of Guanshan and Duanshan, and after a casual greeting, she looked up at Zhang Fengjai standing in front of the lion and asked with a smile. I wonder what to call this little brother. When he followed his third grandfather to learn the Feng Shui of yin yang and 5 elements, his third grandfather mentioned 3 people who had done him a favor during his training when he was young. One of the benefactors was the previous patriarch of the Dongfang family, Dongfang Yuanhui, who was known as the Eye of the Earth. After hearing Guanshan whisper that the beautiful girl in front of him was named Dongfang Wan'er, combined with her ability to appear at Tianren Hospital at this time, Zhang Fengjai guessed that she was probably from the Dongfang family who were proficient in Feng Shui and fortune-telling. So, when facing Dongfang Wan'er's inquiry, he bowed with a complicated expression. I am Kingxiu, my secular name is Zhang Fengjai, and I am honored to meet Miss Dongfang. Kingxiu. When hearing Zhang Fengjai's self-introduction, Dongfang Wan'er noticed the word Kingxiu just like Guanshan and Duanshan, and did not care about the surname and name he deliberately mentioned. This also allowed Zhang Fengjai to guess that the previous patriarch of the Dongfang family probably did not mention Wuxin Taoist with the surname Zhang to her. Reciting the two characters of Kingsyu in his Taoist name softly, and looking up at the lion monster transformed by the spell behind him, Dongfang Wan'er also mistakenly believed that the ordinary-looking boy in front of him was a true disciple of Longhu Mountain. Her face instantly turned cold and she didn't say anything more, but carefully observed the feng shui pattern of the hospital in front of her. Hiss. At this moment, a tongue-spitting sound that made people feel scalp numb suddenly came from the top floor of a two-story shop on the east side of Tianren Hospital. When they heard the creepy sound, everyone at the scene turned their heads to look, and then Dongfang Wan'er, Guanshan, and others couldn't help but change their faces, and showed a look of horror in their eyes. Because on the top floor of the two-story shop, there was a giant python with a body length of nearly 30 meters and a green body with charming patterns. Recalling the information revealed by Zhuang Jian's best friend, the strongest monster among the 48 monsters rushing to Ningji City was the blue-striped giant python whose cultivation reached the peak of the 8th level of foundation building. Zhang Fengjai knew that the giant python on the top floor of the shop was the biggest threat in this operation. The blue-striped giant python slowly raised its head. When it saw the cat demon's body at the door of the hospital, a fierce murderous intent immediately emerged in its striped eyes. Then, the blue-striped giant python suddenly soared into the air and swung its tail. With a short hovering and slicing method, it quickly appeared in front of the cat demon's body. At the same time, Dongfang Wan'er, Guanshan, and others immediately stepped back more than 10 steps away from the blue-striped giant python. But at this moment, from the dark corners of Tianren Hospital, one after another, monsters suddenly walked out, most of which were snakes and cats. After looking at each other, Dongfang Wan'er took out 2 old colored talismans from the tube of her long boots. Guanshan and Duanshan also took out 6 old talismans from the sleeves of their Taoist robes. Facing the defensive actions taken by Dongfang Wan'er and others, the blue-striped giant python's cold eyes flashed a trace of disdain, lowered its head, opened its bloody mouth, swallowed the cat demon's body directly, and turned to look at Zhang Fengjai standing in the yard. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yanyun Yuqi. Chapter 389. Tianren Hospital, Front Yard. 1, 2, 3, 41. Zhang Fengjai ignored the cold gaze of the blue-striped giant python and silently counted the number of monsters that appeared at the scene. 41 monsters. If the cat monster that was just killed and the 3 flying monsters that escaped are counted, the number of monsters that appeared at this time has reached 45. Although there are still 3 monsters short of the total number of monsters mentioned by Zhuang Jian's bestie, considering the lion monster transformed by the talisman behind him and the feng shui formation arranged in advance, the remaining 3 monsters can no longer cause any trouble. Even when they learned that all their kind who went to Ningji City died from the sudden outbreak of terrifying power, the 3 monsters might have turned around and fled directly. Therefore, if the situation allowed, he decided to use the life-saving trump card given by the special beings of Shushan in advance. Thinking of this, Zhang Fengjai looked up at the blue-striped giant python's eyes full of cold eyes, and his indifferent expression was like clear water. The overly calm reaction of the thin young man in front of him made the blue-striped giant python's cold eyes flash with a trace of doubt and fear, and then the cold eyes turned to Dongfang Wan'er, Guanshan, and others, which also made Dongfang Wan'er, Guanshan, and others immediately mobilize the Danshan spiritual power nervously, ready to activate the talisman. Hiss. Facing Dongfang Wan'er and Guanshan who were mobilizing the Danshan spiritual power, the blue-striped giant python flashed a trace of contempt and coldness in its eyes, and let out a low roar at the monsters gathered around. Then, 40 monsters of various kinds kept approaching Dongfang Wan'er and others, and let out low and suppressed roars from their mouths. Just when the black Menjia cat closest to Dongfang Wan'er suddenly tightened its abdomen and prepared to launch an attack, 13 luxury cars rushed over quickly, forcing several monsters to immediately dodge and make way. When the 13 luxury cars stopped steadily on the side of the road, more than 50 Foundation building masters holding weapons with spiritual power condensed quickly rushed out of the cars and gathered with Dongfang Wan'er and others. Brother Feng Yuan, Brother Ding Hai, Brother Yu Yang. Looking at the 13 Taoist robe elders coming out of the luxury cars, Guanshan and Duan Shan hurriedly bowed with one hand to greet them, and Dongfang Wan'er nodded indifferently. Brother Guanshan, Brother Duan Shan, Miss Dongfang. After the 13 Taoist robe elders politely returned the greeting, they looked up at the nearly 30-meter-long blue-striped python. One of the Taoist robe elders with a goatee saluted the blue-striped python solemnly. Feng Yuan greets Brother Qingguan. Facing the greeting of the goatee elder, the blue-striped python nodded politely, which also made Zhang Fengjai, who was secretly preparing to mobilize his life-saving trump card, couldn't help but change his face. Because he suddenly realized that the Feng Shui master who called himself Feng Yuan not only knew the blue-striped giant python who had reached the peak of the 8th level of Foundation building, but also that they were probably both practicing by the Daming Lake in the provincial capital. Then, relying on the fellow township feelings between each other and the situation of being evenly matched, it is possible to reach an agreement of reconciliation and cooperation, and then divide the dragon crystal cultivated by the pseudo-dragon vein together. After all, the essence energy contained in a dragon crystal can not only satisfy all the monsters, Feng Shui masters and cultivators on the scene, but also use weapons condensed by spiritual power to divide the dragon crystal as a whole. Brother Qingguan, according to the secret investigation I just made using the secret treasure compass, the pseudo-dragon vein in front of me only has 20% of the charm of the real dragon vein, and the number of dragon crystals cultivated is only 2. After receiving the polite treatment from the blue-striped giant python, Feng Yuan's eyes flashed with a hint of joy and he quickly proposed. The pure energy contained in a dragon crystal, and the refined demonic power after conversion, is enough to satisfy the cultivation of Brother Qingguan and all the demon brothers present. So, in order to avoid unnecessary conflicts and losses, you and I might as well join forces to capture the consciousness of the pseudo-dragon vein, and then divide the 2 dragon crystals cultivated by the pseudo-dragon vein equally. How about it? After hearing Feng Yuan's explanation and proposal, the blue-striped giant python's patterned eyes revealed a trace of deep thought. After thinking deeply for nearly 3 minutes, the blue-striped giant python glanced at the 5 8th level cultivators, and then nodded silently to agree with his proposal just now, which also made the 40 demon beasts around immediately put away their fierce eyes. Brother Feng Yuan, the thin boy in front of the lion demon beast is called Qingxiu, and he is a true disciple from Longhu Mountain. Just when Feng Yuan and the blue-striped giant python reached an agreement to jointly distribute the dragon crystal, Guanshan turned his head and glanced at Zhang Fengjai, who had a gloomy face, and hurried to his side to remind him. With his hands suddenly clenched in the sleeves of his Taoist robe, Feng Yuan turned his head to look at the thin young man standing in front of the lion monster, with a trace of fear in his eyes. However, when he saw the monsters around him quickly gathering around the blue-striped python, the fear in his eyes was instantly replaced by murderous intent. Then, Feng Yuan took the risk to walk to the blue-striped python, signaled it to lower its noble head, and then whispered in its ear to discuss. The fear replaced by murderous intent, and the risky whispered discussion with the blue-striped python, what kind of conspiracy and trickery the Taoist robe old man named Feng Yuan was playing, Zhang Fengjai could guess it clearly with just a little thought. Fortunately, he had anticipated the other party's joint efforts in advance and was ready to fight back, so his expression was as calm as water without any change. The discussion was not very long, only about 1 minute. The blue-striped python raised its head again and roared twice at a jungle wolf that had reached the peak of the 6th level of Foundation building and a blue cat that was in the early stage of the 6th level of Foundation building. Then, the jungle wolf and the blue cat directly crossed the automatic telescopic door of the hospital and walked towards Zhang Fengjai with green light in their eyes. With a look of disdain in his eyes, Zhang Fengjai quickly formed a seal of the word seal with his 10 fingers, and when it merged into the concrete floor under his feet, he shouted, "Yin Yang and the five elements, turn the world upside down." Along with Zhang Fenji's shouting, countless white smoke emerged from the bottom of the pine, cypress, and osmanthus trees in the courtyard and the bottom of the surrounding walls. While the white smoke quickly spread to the entire hospital, it also completely enveloped the jungle wolf and the blue cat. "Lion, do it." After quickly condensing a mark and integrating it into the lion's body, Zhang Fenjai instructed the lion while mobilizing the spiritual power in his danshan to condense a sharp sword. Then, the lion jumped hard and appeared directly in front of the blue cat. Before the blue cat could react, he opened his bloody mouth and bit off its head. Then, the lion spat out the blue cat's head and turned to pounce on the jungle wolf, who had already taken a defensive posture. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yanyun Yuqi. Chapter 390. Tianren Hospital, Front Yard. Whether in terms of its own cultivation and strength, or its ability to respond to sudden changes, the blue cat whose head was bitten off could not be compared with the jungle wolf, known as the jungle killer. So, at the moment when the lion swung its sharp claws and appeared above its head, the jungle wolf, with its speed as fast as the wind, avoided the lion's claws instead of retreating, and also swung its sharp claws to grab the lion's soft abdomen. Because its body was in mid-air and it could not dodge quickly, the lion could only watch the wolf claws cut its abdomen. But at this moment, a sharp sword appeared out of thin air at the speed of the wind and appeared in the equally weak abdomen of the jungle wolf. If it continued to attack the lion's abdomen, the result would be that its abdomen would also be pierced by the sharp sword. However, when the jungle wolf clearly felt the power of the sword's attack and barely approached the foundation building realm, the hesitant look in his eyes was instantly replaced by determination. Then, it let the sword pierce its abdomen while its claws fiercely scratched the lion's abdomen. When the imagined scene of blood splattering everywhere did not appear, a bad feeling flashed through the jungle wolf's heart. When the sword that pierced its abdomen suddenly separated a Taoist silver needle that went straight to the heart, the jungle wolf knew that he had fallen into the conspiracy of the young man. The lion monster that was fighting with him was just a special spell transformed by the young monk in front of him. The risky method of using a lose-lose method just now could not bring fatal damage to the lion monster. Unfortunately, when it figured it out, it was too late. Because the Taoist silver needle that pierced the heart, while completely destroying the heart, rushed into the head along the meridians and began to crush its soul. Woo! Relying on the powerful vitality of the monster, the jungle wolf raised its head to the sky and let out a miserable howl before its heart was completely destroyed and its soul was about to be pierced. When the wolf howls came out of the white smoke, more than 60 feng shui masters and foundation builders showed a hint of doubt in their eyes, but the blue-striped giant python and the 38 monsters immediately showed fierce eyes. Hiss! When the blue-striped giant python roared softly, the 38 monsters simultaneously crossed the automatic retracting door and rushed into the white smoke that enveloped the entire hospital. However, the blue-striped giant python remained motionless, which also forced Zhang Fenjai to suppress the life-saving trump card he was about to use. If the blue-striped giant python does not enter the best attack range, relying on the opponent's 8th level foundation building peak cultivation, which is comparable to the 9th level foundation building of the cultivator, the life-saving trump cards given by the special beings of Shushan may not be able to successfully kill the blue-striped giant python. If the blue-striped giant python chooses to escape when seeing the bad situation, with Feng Yuan and others who also have murderous intentions towards him, he will definitely not be able to continue to use the second life-saving trump card to chase and kill him. If the blue-striped giant python with the qualifications to advance to the Demon King escapes successfully, it will pose a huge hidden danger to him and his relatives and friends in the future. Therefore, he turned over and rode on the lion's back, allowing the lion to rely on its powerful strength and the cover of white smoke to attack the demon beasts below the 3rd level of foundation building. At the same time, with the help of the demon beast's screams before death, Zhang Fengjai provoked the blue-striped giant python entrenched at the door of the hospital. Little reptile outside the door, the men you sent out are too weak, they can't even defeat me with one move. Oh, sorry, how could I kill a kitten and a little snake with one sword? Little reptile, I think your strength is just so-so, you can barely take a few moves from me. Otherwise, I will let you do it with my own hands and feet, do you dare to compete with me? When Zhang Fengjai's contemptuous provocation came from the white smoke, the blue-striped giant python, who couldn't bear the rage in his heart, immediately rushed into the white smoke with its tail swinging. At the same time, Fen Yuan, who couldn't help but change his face, turned his head and nodded to the 8th level peak of the foundation building, 2 8th level middle and high level foundation building, and 7 7th level foundation building masters behind him. Afterwards, 10 strong men in the high level foundation building realm, holding weapons condensed by spiritual power, prepared to rush into the white smoke. But at this moment, a terrifying demonic energy that could make the stars pale and the world fall into silence immediately rose from the white smoke. This is the demonic energy of the 9th level of foundation building. When feeling the terrifying demonic energy emerging from the white smoke, the strongest cultivator hurriedly stepped back a few steps and shouted with a pale face. The demonic energy of the 9th level of foundation building is infinitely close to the realm of the Golden Core Avenue, and it is far beyond the level that they can fight together. Therefore, Fen Yuan, whose face was instantly gloomy, showed a trace of unwillingness in his eyes, and ordered the 10 strong men in the foundation building realm. Retreat. After watching the strongest Fen Yuan's party leave, the remaining 15 Feng Shui masters at the scene looked at each other. Except for Dongfang Wan'er, Guanshan, and Duan Shan, the remaining 12 Feng Shui masters also immediately left the scene in luxury cars. Destroy. When the terrifying demonic energy climbed to the peak, Zhang Fengjai's roar immediately sounded in the white smoke. Immediately afterwards, a terrifying force that could destroy the world quickly swept across the front of the main building of the hospital in a fan-shaped attack. While killing all the monsters, it also blew away the white smoke formed by the power of the dragon veins. Except for the giant blue-striped python and the 6 demonic beasts above the 7th level of foundation building, which were still lying on the ground with barely any breath left, all the remaining demonic beasts were not only killed by the terrifying demonic energy just now, but they were also killed. The body was also blasted into powder, which also made Dongfang Wan'er, Guanshan, and others couldn't help but take a breath of cold air. Chi. Looking at the results obtained by using the life-saving trump card just now, and recalling the life-saving trump card used against the security uncle before the Mid-Autumn Festival, Zhang Fengjai knew that the demonic power given by the special beings in Shushan was probably dozens of times more powerful than the first time, or even higher. 100 times. Thinking of the 5 special beings in Mouse Mountain who each gave me a terrifying demonic power. When he thought that the position of his heart still contained 4 identical terrifying demonic powers, a mentality of being invincible gradually gave him a domineering aura that made him look down on all the heroes in the world. This not only caused a strange color to appear in Dongfang Wan'er's beautiful eyes, but also completely extinguished the idea of Guanshan and Duan Shan to continue discussing Long Jing.